Hello everyone. Today we're going to be discussing the disappearance of a young 20-year-old man who would disappear on New Year's Eve after a party in a quite rural part of Nova Scotia. This one is definitely a mystery and I think it needs to be talked about more, so let's get into it. 20-year-old Zachary LeFave was born and raised in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, a small port town of under 8,000 people on the southwestern shore of the province that connects ferry services to Bar Harbor, Maine in the US. Zachary, or as he was known as Zach, was very close with his family, living with his grandmother in the small community of Hebron, which is about a 10-minute drive outside of Yarmouth and next to Doctor's Lake. And his mother and the rest of his family just lived up the road. Zach was described as a homebody, kind-hearted, adventurous, and very active. You can find photos of him fishing and enjoying the rural outdoors he lived in, and he loved riding four-wheelers, playing sports, and video games with his friends. Zach worked at a place called Red and White, which is a grocery store off Evangeline Trail, not far from his home. And every day after he got off work, he would either get online and play video games with his friends, or his friends would come over and they'd all hang out in person. He was said to be your typical 20-year-old. He was a very good young adult with no criminal record who didn't cause any trouble. However, on January 21st of 2021, in the middle of winter, Zachary would disappear without a trace just 2 days before his 21st birthday. But we need to jump back to the night before, on December 31st of 2020, which, as we all know, is New Year's Eve. That day, Zach spent the majority of the day outside riding four-wheelers with his friends. Around 4 p.m., Zach and his friends would return to his grandmother's house, and then around 6 p.m., the group would go out. And they were heading to a New Year's party at the Rod Grand Hotel on Main Street in Yarmouth. A couple of girls they knew had a hotel room at that hotel, and so that's where the party started. And there's actually quite a few videos and photos of Zach and his friends having fun and partying in that hotel room. As you can see in the video, everyone's drinking, they seem to be having a good time, and Zach seems to be hitting a vape. And then we have this kind of strange photo of Zach in a stairwell, assumably at the hotel. And there's been quite a lot of speculation around this photo. There's people wondering if he was pushed down the stairs or if he was so drunk and out of it, he fell down the stairs or stumbled or something. But from everything that I've seen, the friends were all having a good time. And it seems like this photo was just taken because they might have been goofing around. Later that evening, the group ended up leaving the Rod Grand Hotel and taking a cab about 15 minutes away to attend another party in the area of Plymouth. 2 friends were said to have gone with Zach around 11:25 p.m. and then a third friend eventually arrived at the party as well. Now, this party wasn't a party with people Zach knew. It seems like one of Zach's friends had a mutual friend there and they were invited to come over and all hang out, so that's why the groups ended up merging and arriving at that house together to all party. The party was said to be somewhere here on Newell Road, just off Highway 334. Now, a girl named Mandy, who actually spoke to Zach at the party, she knew him, she'd known him for years, was actually at that party as well that night, and she ended up going on the Nighttime podcast to speak about the party, telling the host Jordan that the party consisted of around 15 to 20 people, and the home was owned by her friend's brother. And when you hear party, you hear New Year's Eve, it makes you think of this crazy party where people are doing beer bongs and, falling over, they're so drunk, maybe doing beer pong and just being crazy everywhere. However, from what Mandy says, this party was basically just a casual get-together. People were sitting on the couches and drinking. Some people were smoking weed, which is legal in Canada. There wasn't loud music blasting. It was just a bunch of people hanging out, getting drunk for New Year's. She said she was a designated driver that night for her friend, so when she was there, she was sober. And she said when she ended up speaking to Zach that night, he did seem drunk, but he wasn't slurring his words or stumbling or falling over. She described him as being like a chatty, outgoing level of drunk. Now, Mandy would end up leaving the party just 10 minutes before Zach was reported to. And she said when she left the party, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. She didn't feel unsafe. She didn't have any off vibes. There weren't people at this party who she thought were dangerous or anything of those sorts. Even though people didn't know Zach, they were all very friendly and, everyone had their own little groups that they were chatting with, but it wasn't like if you wanted to interrupted them, it would have started a fight or something. Everyone was just trying to have a great night, it seems. Now, things would take a turn when Zach would eventually leave the party. It was described as 1 minute he was there, 1 minute he was gone. And what's really strange was Zach would actually leave the party just 24 minutes after him and his friends arrived, and he left before midnight, which would be the whole point where you'd be going to a party for New Year's usually. You'd all want to be together to watch the ball drop on TV or just to celebrate it hitting midnight. At 11:49 p.m., a person who was not familiar with Zach was said to have witnessed him leaving the party because he noticed Zach was having trouble trying to open the front door, so he helped him open it and let him go outside. Now, this was said not to be alarming because there were, quite a few people at the house, and a lot of the guys would go outside to either pee in a bush or go puke, or maybe he wanted to go, smoke a cigarette or something. So it wasn't alarming, that Zach was trying to go out in the front yard. Zach would last be seen walking on Highway 334 just around that area where the party had been, in Plymouth, which again is about a 10 to 15 minute drive to Yarmouth. However, if Zach was trying to walk home from that area, it would have been like a 3.5 hour walk for him to get back home to Hebron where he lived. And most of this road is actually very rural. It's very forested. There are some homes along it, but for the most part, it's very rural, dense forest around, as well as the ocean. One witness would claim that her husband noticed Zach having a very heated conversation on his cell phone as he was walking up the road. Another witness who was out watching the fireworks would also claim to have witnessed Zach walking along the road. Another witness who was driving in a car, who claimed to be driving his wife home so that he could return back to go night fishing, claimed that Zach was walking along the road with no pants on. Now, the issue with this was, it was the middle of winter. It was New Year's Eve. And for Zach not to be wearing pants is very concerning, considering it was just above freezing at that time. I think it was said to be about around 3 degrees Celsius. For my Americans out there, I'd say that's probably around 36 degrees Fahrenheit, if I'm going to roughly estimate. So it was cold, especially to not be wearing pants and to just be walking around in a long sleeve shirt and boxers. Now, this husband and wife who were driving the vehicle decided that when the husband was driving back, he was going to check on Zach to make sure he was okay if he was still out there, because again, he was only wearing his boxers outside. However, when the man drove back, Zach was nowhere to be found. When Zach didn't arrive home that night and no one could contact him, his family and friends began to worry immediately. Worry began when one of Zach's friends returned home from the party and he could not contact Zach at all. So he quickly called Zach's family to see if they knew where he was, if maybe he'd fallen asleep or something, and then police were immediately called when no one knew where Zach was. That is how out of character it was for him to be unaccounted for and to not keep in contact with someone or let them know where he was going or going to be. You'd think because it was New Year's Eve that it would be expected that, someone, especially he was an adult, would maybe, crash on someone's couch or sleep over somewhere because he didn't want to, drive drunk or didn't want someone else to drive him home drunk. But the fact that Zach was at a party with people he wasn't familiar with, none of his friends knew where he was, and he was extremely close with his friends. They were almost like family to him. And the fact that none of his family knew where he was, that was extremely concerning because Zach would not just vanish. So it was only 4 a.m. when his family began driving around looking for him, which is extremely good because we see so many cases where people aren't noticed to be missing or police aren't contacted for like a day or two after. And after that, it's really hard to try to find someone when people aren't looking immediately. But despite that, to this day, as you see him filming this video, Zach is still missing. So even though they began looking pretty much immediately after he last was seen, about 4 hours later, this case is still unsolved, which is extremely scary. Now, Zach's pants and his wallet were actually found, and then there was rumored to also be his hat and his cigarettes found as well, but they were said to be found on the side of the road near the party on Flint Road. So I'll have that on the map here, that little intersection. And this was a really big red flag to the family because Zach would never take his hat off. As you can see from all the photos of him, he is always wearing that damn hat. His hat being found was even more concerning than his wallet being found because that is how much Zach wouldn't take that hat off, which meant the family believed something bad happened to him. But it's also extremely strange when you think about it because you'd expect if Zach's pants were off, he would have had to take his shoes off in order to get his pants off. But that meant then he put his shoes back on after taking his pants off. But why would he take his pants off, especially right outside where the party was? It just doesn't really make much sense. But we know that he did that because he was spotted walking down the road with no pants on. But considering how cold it was outside, it makes me wonder why he would have done that. And it seems that he did that pretty immediately after he went outside the party. And I know a lot of people have brought up the concept of him having hypothermia, but the strange thing is he was inside that house party for about 24 minutes it was. He was in the house, so he wouldn't have had hypothermia. And then he walked outside and immediately stripped his pants off. That is what's really weird to me. So I want to assume just from that information that he didn't take his pants off because of hypothermia. So what was the reasoning for him taking his pants off then? And then also taking his pants off, but then putting his shoes back on. It's really weird. Once word was out, the RCMP and search and rescue teams scoured the area along with locals. They searched properties, trails, back roads, abandoned properties, wooded areas, outer buildings. anywhere they could in hopes of finding Zach somewhere. At first, they simply thought maybe he had stumbled off into the woods. I heard he either had a bad leg or knee or ankle or something that wasn't the greatest, so it was kind of expected if maybe he did somehow fall into the woods, he might not have been able to get back up. But you'd expect if he had done that, he would be just off the road somewhere. However, all of those areas were searched and he was not found. Not one sign of him was found, other than his clothes over by where the party was. Missing persons posters were plastered around the city, and a Facebook group was formed in hopes of spreading information on Zach's disappearance, which I'll also have linked down below. Please go support the family on there. And just a couple days after Zach went missing, it would finally snow. And it would also only be 2 days later when police would call off the search and rescue. This is when the family decided to take over and continue searching on their own. The local community center would be open for all of the searchers to gather, and everyone once again began canvassing the roads and the surrounding woods. However, it didn't seem to be very organized at first. Again, these are all civilians essentially just trying to organize their own search and rescue team. However, a family friend named Victoria ended up taking over the search and rescue with her partner, and the two of them ended up creating their own grid searches and organize everything so that it could be more effective in trying to find Zach, especially since police no longer seem to be trying to. Victoria actually made a very good decision, and she had the searchers going farther into the woods than they thought someone could yell for help, because the assumption at this point was that if Zach had gone into the woods and gotten injured, they would have been able to hear him from the road at a certain distance. So they wanted to go even farther into the woods than that, just in case he had walked deep enough into the woods where he couldn't be calling for help and people would hear him. But she did mention that there were parts of these forests, because again, this was quite a rural area, that were either too thick to walk through or boggy. And she said that if Zach had fallen into one of those bog holes, they were actually deeper than a person. So it would have been almost impossible to search, and they didn't have the resources to search all of those bog holes. What's so strange about Zach's disappearance is that he had no enemies, he had no criminal record, and he never went half a day without contacting his family or his friends. He seemed to just be a very good young man who wanted to celebrate the new year. So let's go a little bit deeper into the timeline of the period when Zach got to the party to where he disappeared, because I actually have timestamps for all of that, because Zach ended up calling a bunch of people after he left the party. As you remember, I mentioned there was a witness who heard him talking on a phone. So Zach ended up leaving the party at 11:49 p.m. As I said, he was only there for about 24 minutes, and it was right before midnight that he left, which is strange because, again, the whole point of a New Year's party is to celebrate the new year. And as I just said, as Zach was walking, he seemed to make a number of phone calls to his friends. The first phone call Zach placed was almost immediately after he left the house. And Zach would actually end up telling this friend that he was in Quinnen on Wilson Road. Now, this friend said that Zach didn't sound distressed. However, the issue with this is Quinnen is actually a half an hour drive from where Zach actually was. So he seemed to be very confused about where exactly he was at this party. So it does make me question how intoxicated he may have been, because they'd only traveled from Yarmouth to Plymouth, about a 15-minute drive. Yet, in his head, he thought he was over half an hour away from that in Quinnen, which we know he wasn't. It would be impossible for him to be there because he was at that party and then literally like 30 seconds later on the phone claiming that he was in Quinnen. It said that Zach also mentioned during this phone call that he was cold, which also is strange because, again, he had just walked out of the house party and then seemingly stripped his pants off. I don't know if he called while he was stripping his pants off or he immediately stripped his pants off, put his shoes back on and called. It's very strange, that little time frame of events immediately after he left the house. And we know all of this kind of happened at the same time because the phone call ended at 11:52 p.m., just minutes after he had left the house. 2 minutes later at 11:54 p.m., Zach made another phone call to a friend. In this phone call, it said that Zach stated he was cold and was asking for a ride. At this point, he again told this other friend that he also thought he was in Quinnen. However, this friend also said Zach didn't seem distressed. This phone call would end 4 minutes later at 11:58 p.m. At midnight, which was now January 1st of 2021, a witness would end up spotting Zach on Newell Road, walking towards the end of the road near the bridge. This witness was said to be with her son. Now, I couldn't find like a bridge in that area, so I'm assuming from what you can see here on Google Maps that this is the bridge. It looks like there might be a small stream that passes under it, but it's not like a traditional bridge that he would have been near, it seems. At 12:02 a.m., Zach made a third phone call to a friend. In this phone call, Zach ends up telling the friend that he's with people of color who are black. But that didn't make sense in hindsight because none of the people at the party were black. It seemed like everyone at the party was white. Again, this friend claims Zach didn't seem distressed in this call either, and it seems like it can't be confirmed if Zach was even actually with anyone, which implies to me that there may not have been other people speaking on the line. It was only Zach on the line, and this friend might not have heard anyone else there with him. Now, with this phone call, I didn't see stated when the call ended. However, we do know just minutes later at 12:07 a.m., Zach made a fourth phone call. However, this person didn't answer the call. At 12:15 a.m., Zach was spotted by a witness walking with traffic on Highway 334 towards Yarmouth on the corner before the Newell Road coming from Wedgeport. Which again, this is a location I'm a bit confused about because I couldn't find a corner before Newell Road. I'm wondering if they mean he was somewhere by that bridge again, or as you can see on the map here, there is like a curve in the road, which is strange because he would later be spotted walking north, not south on Highway 334. So I don't know why he would have walked south and then returned walking north unless he was just that confused. However, a second driver would also confirm seeing Zach walking with traffic towards Yarmouth at this time. At 12:25 a.m., Zach is spotted for the last time walking past Newell Road towards Yarmouth. And this was by that husband and wife that I mentioned where they had the conversation about the husband trying to spot Zach when he drove back. Now, it is thought that something happened to Zach within those 20 minutes when that couple driving by seen him and when the man returned driving back to see if Zach was there, which would have been between 12:25 to 12:45 because the husband would end up driving back through the area at 12:45 a.m. However, as I said, Zach wasn't there anymore. So in that 20-minute time span, the question is, where did Zach go and what happened to him? Another driver would pass through the area around 12:45 to 1 a.m. and they also didn't see Zach anywhere on the road. Now, this other road called Sims Road was also brought up in the whole conversation about where Zach may have walked to. And Sims Road is about a 10-minute walk from the party. Now, there's also a narrative that was brought up, and I can't remember if it was a family friend or if it was Zach's cousin Kimberly, and I'm pretty sure she said Zach mentioned to one of the friends on one of these calls something about a horse. And it would turn out that there seems to be a mailbox near Sims Road that has a horse on it. So that is why people think that Zach might have made it somehow to Sims Road. But the issue with that is, according to Kimberly, the family friend, when you compare the information where he mentions a horse to possibly this horse mailbox, it doesn't line up because the witnesses spotted Zach over by Highway 334 near Newell Road still. So it seems like he was kind of wandering in that same area of the highway in Newell Road where the party was for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, like just wandering around that area. He seemed to be walking northbound on the highway, which would eventually lead him to Sims Road, as you can see here on the map. But it just doesn't line up with the timestamps of the phone calls and the timestamps of the witnesses. So it's weird. So once again, timeline-wise, the last time Zach was confirmed to talk to someone on the phone was 12:02 a.m. The last phone call he made was at 12:07 a.m. However, the person never picked up the phone. After that last phone call, it was also said that Zach was still using apps possibly on his phone like Snapchat or Facebook Messenger. However, I haven't seen any information on that talks about what he may have sent, who he may have texted, anything like that. Police have actually been just very tight-lipped about everything, it seems, and it's the family that's come out and spoken about what they know. However, the last confirmed sighting of Zach, despite, these phone calls and possible text messages, was at 12:25 a.m. out on Highway 334. I don't know, it is very odd because why would Zach take his pants off, put his shoes back on, walk out to the highway, wander back and forth for a period of time, and then just vanish? It's strange. On top of that, Zach's last cell phone ping was off of the Belleville Tower, which is the closest tower to the area. So it's said to be very common that any cell phones in that area, because it is such a small community, are going to ping off that tower. So it's not anything strange or like out of the ordinary. What is so scary about all of this though is, between Zach leaving and the phone calls and the witnesses seeing him, he vanished in a very short period of time. And despite all of the searches that have happened in that area, Zach, his plaid shirt that he was wearing, his boxers, cell phone, none of that has ever been found. In 2023, the RCMP once again pleaded for tips and information on Zach's disappearance, saying, and I quote, "Over the last 2 years, investigators have followed up on numerous tips, and more information continues to come in. The investigative team is asking specifically for information from anyone who may have picked up a man between 12 a.m. on January 1st, 2021, near Haiti Lane and Highway 334, end quote. Zach's cousin Kimberly Morton saying, and I quote, "It's been quite a mystery, but we live in a very small town, so I do believe that there are multiple people around here that know what happened. We 100% suspect foul play. We've been, probably for the last year and a half, been trying to get the Major Crimes Unit to make a media release stating that they also believe that it is foul play, that there were suspicious circumstances or something of the sort," end quote. So let's talk about the possibilities of what may have happened here, which honestly, since there is such limited information, it is kind of hard, but there has been a lot of talk about this case online. Since this is such a small town, you'd think if someone had done something to Zach that was local, that they would have said something by now, that someone would have known something and said something or slipped up. You know, people in small towns like to talk, they like to gossip. And since it's been 3 years, you'd think someone would have said something by now. So it makes me wonder if he was abducted some way, somehow, if it was someone who wasn't local who was driving through the area. You know, we have so many cases right now, especially out of Texas, like Caleb Harris, we have Harley Morris, both young 20-year-old men who were walking in the middle of the night and vanished into thin air. Zach's case is extremely similar to that, in my opinion, especially when you compare his case to Caleb Harris's, where Caleb was on his phone sending Snapchats and he was just outside of his home and then he just vanishes. Then we have Zach here, same similar circumstances. He's just outside down the street from a house party where his friends are at and other people that he was just there with, and he just simply vanishes in the middle of the night. It's strange. You know, we hear a lot about women being kidnapped in the middle of the night or going missing, and that usually makes more sense to us. Yes, women are typically less strong, they're easier to abduct. So when you get to, you know, a bigger, stronger male, especially a young 20-year-old man who would be usually stronger than someone to be overpowered, it makes you really concerned where all these young men are disappearing to. And it is scary that if it was somehow someone local, that, you know, the family could be standing next to this person in a grocery store or passing by them while they're walking down the street. It's scary. I guess there is somehow the possibility as well that because he was only wearing, you know, like a plaid shirt and boxers, that he would have succumbed to the elements since it was quite cold out that night. But again, you think if he had died from hypothermia out there, he would have been found. It kind of reminds me of, say, the Jalen Williams case, where he was also a young man who would end up being found naked, frozen on the side of the road. And there was foul play suspected in that case as well. However, it was ruled, as far as I can remember or seen at this point, as hypothermia. And he also was seemingly running through the town naked and then died of hypothermia, which again is... that case bothers me, honestly, till this day. I don't know why you just think someone would run through a town naked in the middle of winter. But then we have Zach here also, who seems to have kind of stripped off his clothes, even though he just left a warm house party and then seemingly vanished. So what I'm trying to get at here is you'd think if he had succumbed to the elements, he would just be off the road somewhere, kind of like how Jalen Williams was. He clearly isn't, because people have scoured those woods over and over and over again, and the sides of that road, up and down as far as they could go. And he wasn't found anywhere there. No sign of him. Not even his clothing or his cell phone or his pair of shoes, nothing. Another interesting point I seen brought up was that statement Zach made over the phone about the people of color. It makes you wonder, could he simply have just been walking down the street and there were other parties going on at other houses, and maybe there was an individual who was standing outside, maybe smoking or something, and he just made a comment over the phone that he was with people of color. It's odd. It is kind of strange, especially since it doesn't seem like the friend heard anyone else there. But I've also seen mention that there was a home in the area that had these like black human silhouettes cut out and put on their lawn. So it makes you wonder, because Zach was kind of so out of it that he thought he was in a whole different, you know, town than he was even in, that maybe he's seen these silhouettes and thought that they were people. So could he have misinterpreted what he was seeing and telling his friend? Possibly. It's all weird. It's just all so strange. I mean, if he was that out of it, you think that someone would have reported seeing him that drunk or just that out of it off of taking a substance or something, which, as far as everyone said, Zach wasn't into doing, you know, hardcore drugs or anything like that. He'd smoke some weed, he'd drink alcohol, but like nothing crazy. especially something that would make you so out of your mind that you were seeing things and not knowing where you were possibly. On top of that, this party seemed to be described as, just a normal get together. No one there seemed to be described as being, shady characters or like into crazy drugs or anything. It was just alcohol and weed being passed around there at the house. But it does make me wonder if he was just that out of it that he stumbled off somewhere or maybe got into someone's vehicle that he shouldn't have, if maybe he could be drugged or something like that, or taken something that affected him negatively, especially because who goes outside and immediately takes their pants off? That's just the part that's so strange. Why did Zach take his damn pants off? It also makes me wonder as well, because Plymouth is quite close to the ocean, if Zach did somehow maybe walk far enough that he fell into a river or something and was washed into the ocean. Honestly, as sad as that is, could this just be a Riley Strain situation where he did just walk so far that he fell into the water? Again, there isn't like a huge river or anything next to Highway 334. You have to walk, as you can see on the map here, quite far through people's homes and backyards or through forest to even get to the ocean. But is there some kind of possibility that he did get so lost and he was so out of it that he did somehow fall into a water somehow and was washed away into the ocean, and that is why no one has found him, and that's why this is so strange, why there's no signs of foul play, there's no blood on the road where he could have been hit by a car or something and then that was covered up, or the fact that, his phone wasn't found, or nothing was just found scattered somewhere. After seeing that happen in the Riley Strain case, I could see that as a possibility here. But again, it is quite a distance he would have had to walk off course from the road to have even gotten close, it seems, to water where he would have been washed away without anyone ever finding him. But that's kind of the only ways that my mind kind of wanders with this case. You could kind of go anywhere with this, especially if there wasn't description of the party. You could think maybe there was someone at the party who maybe tried to haze him or attack him or something, and it went wrong, and now everyone's, covering it up because they don't want to get in trouble. But from everything it seems, Zach's good friends were there, that he's known pretty much his whole life, that he was as close as family with. And then there were all these strangers there he didn't really know well at all. But there were also other people there, like that girl who spoke on the Nighttime podcast, who knew him but didn't know him super close. And like everyone just seemed to be having a normal night there. It wasn't a crazy party. It wouldn't have been a place where they would be getting so drunk, doing beer bongs and hazing people, making them strip naked and, I don't know, butt chugging a beer bong. I don't know. Like it wasn't that kind of party. Like if something like that was happening, I could see maybe foul play going on or something, but Zach was walking down the road. Witnesses seen him walking on the road. So what happened once he got to that road after that? What happened in that 20 minutes? Did someone possibly pull over on the side of the road and offer him a ride, and it could have been a serial killer or someone just wanting to commit foul play and took advantage of the situation? That would be the closest second for me, because it just doesn't really make sense that he would just vanish. And it doesn't make sense to me that he would simply walk off the road and die of hypothermia in this case. I think they would have found him if that was true. $150,000 reward is currently being offered, and yet still no one has come forward. No one's talking, but someone out there knows something. If you have any information on Zach's whereabouts or what happened to him, please contact the appropriate authorities. I'll have them down below. And as always, if you know something, please say something. Let's take a good look at Zach once again. He is a white male standing 5'9" and around 175 pounds with brown facial hair, brown hair, and blue eyes. He was last seen wearing a plaid shirt and boxer shorts. What I want to know is how you all feel about this case. Do you have any theories or information that I didn't include in this video? Let's have a conversation down below. I'll be down in the comment section with you all chatting. My heart goes out to Zach's family and friends, and I truly, truly hope that they can eventually get answers to what happened to Zach and where he is. As always, I hope you all stay safe out there, lock your windows and doors, and I hope to see you in the next video.